Good morning, everyone. Good to see you today. Welcome to church. If it's any comfort, I'll take my watch off and I'll put it in. Got a Bible? Please turn to Matthew chapter 5. Just have that open. Matthew chapter 5. We've been going through the Sermon on the Mount. So on page 970, we've got to the little section, verse 38 to 42. Let me ask you a question. As you thought about coming to church today, what was in your mind? Did you think, well, we'll go and sing a few songs, hope they're decent songs? We'll meet my friends, we'll listen to a talk, hopefully it won't be too long. We'll get off to have lunch. Is that the kind of thing? Matthew chapter 5, page 970. Was there any thought in your mind that what you're doing this morning might result in change in your life? Did that thought even cross your head as you thought about coming to church? That listening to the Bible being explained is meant to be transformational. What do these men, these followers of Jesus, think as they sat on the hillside and listened to him teach them this sermon? Now these are regular, ordinary guys. We know that some of them are fishermen. We know a couple of them are called James and John. They've got a nickname, the Sons of Thunder. I mean, that kind of gives you an idea of the kind of guys they are. They don't take prisoners. And Jesus comes up with this stuff. So let's read what he says. You have heard that it was said, verse 38, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go a mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Don't react to insult. Slap. If the Roman soldier commandeers you to carry their kit bag, when you get to the mile marker, say to them, excuse me, Mr. Soldier, would you mind if I carried it for another mile for you? And if somebody tries to rip you off, don't put up a fight. What do you think these guys are making of this? When they're listening to Jesus talk in this kind of way, do you think they're sitting there going, hey mate, that's naive. That's unrealistic. Here's Jesus closing the door on retaliation, forbidding revenge. Jesus is putting the word harmless into his constitution. Here's how his people are to behave. They are to be as shrewd as serpents, but as harmless as doves. Harmless. If you're a doctor, you've got to kind of sign up to the little phrase, do no harm. Now that's one thing in the context of sick people and hospitals and patients. It's quite another thing to do it in Jesus' world, where there's whips and swords and robbers and the like. And yet he says to them, do not resist an evil person. Now I'm going to assume, as you sit and listen this morning, that you are thinking exactly the same as Jesus' disciples were thinking as they sat on that hillside, which was, you must be kidding. That is just not going to work in my world. I cannot behave like this. It is impractical. It is the way to be a loser. I wish I could have saw this little, those little bubbles you see in the comics above people's heads to tell you what they're thinking. That'd be great. I'd love that. Okay. I'm going to give you 4 reasons this morning why Jesus is not a loser, as we look at this passage together. I want to persuade you to change. Or rather, I want my God to persuade you to change. 4 reasons why we should take this seriously and stop behaving the way we usually behave. Right? Number 1, Jesus knows how to win. Number 1. Jesus knows how to win. So, these verses are really a commentary on what Jesus said at the very start of the sermon when he gave those Beatitudes. Blessed are. The 3rd Beatitude says, Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. This is just a little explanation of what he means behind that word meek. Now, it's a tricky word to translate, kind of comes out in a number of ways. But basically, it's about submitting to difficulty without complaint. It's about being gentle with other people's failures. Just turn over a few pages with me to Matthew chapter 12. At the end of chapter 11, Jesus says, Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle. Now, it's the same word. He says, I'm gentle, I'm meek. And then if you look across the page, there's a little bit sort of set in a slightly different way. There's a quote from the Old Testament that describes his ministry. Verse 18 of chapter 12. Here is my servant whom I've chosen, the one I love and whom I delight. I'll put my spirit on him. He'll proclaim justice to the nations. He'll not quarrel or cry out. No one will hear his voice in the street. He won't be bawling and shouting and say, hey, look at me, look at my problems. A bruised reed he will not break. A smouldering wick he will not snuff out. He's gentle with sinners. When Jesus is on trial, Pilate, the Roman governor, is amazed at his meekness. The Jews are just firing all these accusations at him. And he stands there and he doesn't say a word. And Pilate is amazed that he doesn't speak up. Similarly, Peter, one of his closest disciples, is amazed at his meekness. When they hurled their insults at him, he says. When they hurled their insults, he did not retaliate. Astonishing. But then Pilate gets a bit irritated with Jesus. Don't you realize, he says, I have power either to free you or to crucify you. And at that point in the trial, Jesus opens up another dimension. You would, he says, have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Here's what lies behind Jesus' meekness. He knows who calls the shots. And it connects with what he said just a moment or two ago. My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my followers would fight. I just pause and think about this for a second. Here's the real surprise. This meek king and this feeble kingdom are about to power their way through the world and sweep everything out of their way. So within 25 years, the message of Jesus will be in the center of the known world. It'll be in Rome. Within 300 years, the emperor of the Roman Empire will be a Christian. Within about 1500 years, the Roman Empire will be just in the history books, and other empires will arise, and other empires will fall, and all the isms, communism, fascism, capitalism, will just have to give way to the power of the message of Jesus. You and I live in a world today where more people are Christians than any other religion in the world. 2.2 billion people would say they follow Jesus. This meek king and this feeble kingdom just blows everything away. Wow. Wow. Jesus knows how to win. You and I are surrounded by the images of successful people who know how to make money, Dragon's Den, and who know how to win by fighting. You and I are tempted to look at these images and think that they are the success stories. No, we need better heroes, better images, better things to feast our minds on than video games. Because if that's what's in your head, you will never follow this king. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. I think they really will. They really will. Here's the second thing. Jesus knows where the danger lies. So Israel's an occupied country. Roman soldiers could commandeer people to do their bidding, carry their kit, pick up that cross. Simon of Cyrene comes in from the countryside and some Roman soldier just grabs him, pick up the cross. And Jesus says, if one of them says to you, pick that up, say to him, how about I take it a bit further? Unreasonable demands, injustice, people forcing us to do things we don't want to do. And it causes that resentment to rise in you. Yeah, I'll sort you. Thoughts of retaliation. And there's a sense about all this that is kind of attractive. You kind of like to think about it. What we might do to those people. I think last week, Andy referenced John the Baptist, started the service off on that note, or maybe it was a few weeks ago, sorry. John the Baptist challenged Herod over his marriage to Herodias, an adulterous marriage. This woman belonged to his brother. He had just taken her, made her his. And John the Baptist went to him and said, do you know what you're doing is wrong? And it says in the Bible that Herodias nursed a grudge against John and wanted to kill him. And Mark's Gospel tells us that there was an opportune time, an opportune moment arose. Herod had a birthday party. There was lots of alcohol. There was a bit of dirty dancing. And then Herod makes this bold offer. He's so pleased with this girl, he says, do you know what? You can have up to half my kingdom, which is not his to give, by the way, because it all belongs to Rome. But never mind. You can have half my kingdom, he says. And she goes to her mother and says, what should I ask for? And her mother says, go and ask him for the head of John the Baptist. Now, I'm going to read you what happens next. Once the girl hurried to the king with a request, I want you to give me right now the head of John the Baptist on a dish. The king was greatly distressed because of his oaths and his dinner guests. But because of that, he did not want to refuse her. So he immediately sent an executioner with orders to bring John's head. The man went, beheaded John in the prison, and, wait for it, brought back the head on a dish. He presented it to the girl. Got the picture? And she gave it to her mother. Think about the consequences of that. This is what somebody's written. The event would traumatize her daughter for the rest of her daughter's life. It would irrevocably damage Herodias' relationship with her husband, having humiliated him in public. She didn't care. Personal revenge was for her an overpowering drug. Jesus knows where the danger lies. Retaliation, revenge, getting your own back is an overpowering drug that causes. Think of Jacob's sons. They hate their brother Joseph. They think he's a big head, shouting his mouth off. They determine they're going to get him. They put him down a pit. They sell him into slavery. And for the rest of their lives, they live with the guilt of that occasion. And even when Joseph says to them, it's okay, they still think he's going to kill them when their father dies. It is an overpowering drug. These are dangerous things. Jesus knows that the freedom we need is not from whatever circumstances have done to us or what other people have done to us. No, that's not the freedom we need. No one experienced injustice like Jesus, yet he doesn't react. You've already seen how he treats, how he thinks of himself as the Lord's servant. He exists as the Lord's servant. He exists to reflect the character of his Father. You look at Jesus and you get a glimpse of the compassion of God the Father. He's slow to anger. Jesus does not rage at people. You get a glimpse of his mercy. He says to a thief, he says to a criminal, today you'll be with me in paradise. You get a sense of his self-forgetfulness as he's going to the cross, as he's contemplating the agony that's coming his way. He turns to these women and says, do not wait for me, wait for yourselves. You get a sense of his compassion on his persecutors. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. Jesus knows who he is. And he's free from resentment, free from retaliation, free from anger, free from bitterness. As you see what he does for these people as he dies on the cross. And we need to remind ourselves that you and I are not We're not free to do what we want. So Andy's reminded us of this catechism. Calvin's catechism we're learning. Not John's, but yeah. So the question, what is our only hope in life and in death? Well, what is our only hope? That we're not our own, but belong to God and to our Saviour Jesus Christ. Just take a minute and think about that. I belong to God. I am to reflect the character of my Master. If anyone forces you to go a mile, go with them 2 miles, because that's what my Master's like. He relieves other people of their loads. He lifts the burden off people's shoulders. He's never content to do the minimum. He always goes that extra mile. Jesus knows where the danger lies. He knows where the danger lies. Let me tell you the third thing. Jesus calls us to be involved in a different battle. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. Now, he's not talking about domestic abuse here. That's not the issue. God cares about domestic abuse. You can read about 2 abused wives, Hannah and Hagar, in the Bible, and how concerned he is for them. No, the slap on the cheek is much more about contempt than it is about violence. You can think of it as the cutting comment, as the abusive remark, as the digital salute. Now, Jesus will be exploited by many, and his miracles will be welcome, but his message will be ignored. He'll be slandered by the religious authorities as a man who does his miracles by means of the devil's work. But he's not looking to get even. We've observed how he thinks of himself as the Lord's servant, as the slave without any rights. Now, I don't know about you, but I find myself very easily using the language of service. You know, we sing songs about being the Lord's servant, right? Ye servants of God, your master proclaim. We sing songs about... My problem is not the concept. My problem is when people treat me like a servant. Yeah. That's when the trouble starts, isn't it? When they don't thank me. When I am taken for granted. When we are treated as though we had no rights. Now, Jesus does not devote his time and energy to getting his rights. He's not about justice for himself. He will proclaim justice to the nations. He will not quarrel or cry out till he's brought justice through to victory. He will endure injustice so that others can experience justice. So the weary can be offered rest. The people who are having all these demands chucked on their shoulders about the law. He'll go to the outcast, the leper, the Roman soldier. He will go to these people who are on the fringes, because that's who he is. So I need to ask myself, which battle am I fighting? Am I upset that I'm not being given my place? Or am I looking for justice for myself and my family? Or am I concerned about the injustice of others? C.T. Studd said, why should someone be able to refuse the gospel twice before someone has had the opportunity to hear it once? Right? I think that's pretty fair. You and I have our children growing up in a gender-confused world. Hey, you can be anything you want. You want to be a girl today? We should be bothered about that. Or the plight of the elderly, who are constantly presented as being a great burden on the state. That's who you are. You're just a burden. Jesus leads us out of our readiness to endure injustice so that others can receive justice. I'm going to say one last thing. But you can see what's going on here. Jesus knows how to win. Jesus knows where the dangers are. Jesus calls you to fight in different battles. And finally, Jesus shows you where the reality can be experienced. At bottom, faith is an invitation to take part in an experiment. Yeah? Faith involves risk. Let me tell you a story. I'm going to finish with this. Okay. It's about a student called Sue, who was not a Christian. But she has some Christian friends. She started to be attracted by what she sees in their lives. And she speaks to a Christian worker called Becky, and she says to her, Becky, I see things I like, but I just don't believe. And she says to her, this is what you need to do. Just start to read the Bible. And every day when you read the Bible, just see if there's something that kind of stands out for you as you read it. And just kind of have it in your head. Maybe ask God if he would help you, see if he's there. So Sue starts having what she calls pagan quiet times. She reads the Bible, she notices something there, and then she prays. God, or maybe it's the four walls. I'm trying to find out if you're real. One day she reads the passage we've read together this morning. Matthew 5, 38 to 42. And verse 40 kind of stands off the page for her. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. Somehow, for some reason, that verse kind of goes bonk. And she has it in her head. And she goes off to university. And she sits at the desk she has been given for her studies in the library. And she's kind of getting settled down. And then she watches this guy who's really this student who's really agitated coming into the library, and he's kind of prowling around. And eventually he catches her eye and goes straight towards her. And he starts to shout at her and say to her, "This is my desk. Get out." And they have this great big argument in the library about the desk. Transpires the university's not giving him one, so he's wanting somebody else's. Librarian comes across, tries to quiet it down. That doesn't work. Eventually the thing escalates up to the tutor's study. There's a tutor, there's this angry guy, and there's Sue. At this point in the proceeding, she remembers what she's read that morning. Oh my goodness. If somebody wants to sue you, take your shirt, give them your coat as well. knowing my luck, I'll give him the desk and find out that God's not real. No, she doesn't think that. I'm going to read you what happens. So they go to the tutor. He can't handle this really angry guy. And he turns to her and he says to her, "So what do you think should happen?" And she says, "Give him the desk." Right, this is what happens next. Listen to this. When we walked out of the door, he grabbed my arm and asked me why in the world I'd let him have the desk. I told him he would think I'd flip, but I was trying to discover if Jesus was really who he claimed to be. In order to know if Jesus was really the way to God, I was attempting to obey the things he told us to do. So I've been reading the Gospels, and today I read that if somebody tried to rip me off, I was supposed to let them and even throw in something extra to boot. All I could see were the whites of his eyes. So I'm going to give you the desk, but don't push your luck about something extra. Then he asked, why in the world would Jesus say such a senseless thing? Then I said, hey, if there's one thing I've learned from reading about Jesus and meeting these Christians, it's that Jesus wants to give us a whole lot more than a desk if we let him. I think the basic idea is that knowing Jesus makes us rich more than owning possessions. So the desk's yours. And then she says to the Christian lady she's been working with, I simply knew it was all true. I knew from the inside out. I sort of felt as though God was saying, well done, that's how I want my children to behave. Wouldn't it be marvellous today if you discover God is true, he knows who you are, and he has got great plans for your life. Faith is an experiment, and you have to conduct the experiment. You have to get inside. You've got to start doing it. So I say to you today, if you're on the edge of things, hey, start to read the Bible. Notice what you read. Take it with you into the day. Pray to God or to the four walls that he might reveal himself to you. Jesus knows how to win. The meek really will inherit the earth. We need to go for it.